Welcome back, everybody. We're here to talk about another video today. Today's video is sponsored by Established Titles. Established Titles isn't, no, I'm just kidding. I know that's like a scam or whatever. So let's talk about Victor Wembanyama. Victor, aka Wemby, aka the Wimberman, I just made that one up, is a very highly touted prospect out of France. He's about 7'4", 7'5", can handle the ball, can shoot it. Looks like a light-skinned, taller Kevin Durant in some ways. It's like if Rudy Gobert accidentally woke up on the wrong side of the bed and could play basketball. So yeah, he's a prospect that everybody is clamoring over. There's some teams trying pretty hard right now to be as bad as they can for the rest of the season so they can get him. So I think I'm going to talk about what teams I think fits best for him. So as I look at Tankathon, teams in the NBA these days, there are not as many teams tanking as there used to be back in the day. I think the play-in tournament has really helped stop that along with the change in the lottery odds. I think we see more teams trying to compete for most of the season. There's some teams that come in knowing ain't no way they're going to win a championship, so they go all in on their prospect development, and it's been pretty clear for most of the season that they're trying to get a high draft pick. So first, I'm probably going to talk about what would be my favorite spot for him to land. It's probably Houston. For me, building a team in a rebuild has always been about making sure you have positional versatility. Clogging up all your picks with the same position is how you end up like Philadelphia a few years back, where people used to joke and call them the Philadelphia 70 centers. Houston is already prepared at the guard. They have a good kind of tweener wing with Jabari Smith Jr. So one more high draft pick and they can get a big, that would work out great for them. I think this might be my favorite spot for him. And if they get him, they could probably start transitioning to trying to win rather than this year where it's very clear they're not doing that. I still think they need to focus to bring in some veterans first, but I think they can build next year, and if Victor proves to be legit, and they have some tradable players and picks in their bag if they want to start building within the next few years. Okay, Detroit. I had typed all this out and had all these different reasons for a lot of these teams, but this was kind of a couple months ago. So the trade deadline has changed some of these. Detroit was a team that I had listed that was a team that was clearly in the market for a center. There was some talk that DeAndre Ayton could have signed with them when he was having his issues with his contract, even though they didn't work out an offer sheet for him when he was a restricted free agent. Detroit is very clearly guard heavy right now. We know Cade is there for the future. We're seeing how Jalen Hardy and Killian fit in. That's interesting if they're going to have time for all those guys, but we know they have the guard position locked up. So I doubt they want to go for Scoot Henderson when they already got the guard position locked up. So what changed for Detroit is they traded for James Wiseman not too far back. You can say whatever you want about Wiseman, but he was a top 2 pick for a reason. The talent is clearly there. Whether he can contribute to a winning program remains to be seen. But now they have at least somebody they can plug in there. So unless you are a big believer in Wiseman, Jalen, and Isaiah Stewart, then the need for a talented big like Victor is there. I do think if he went to Detroit, they may need a year or two before they start winning, but the fit is definitely there. So Detroit has been bad pretty recently, but they are kind of like a historic franchise when you look at the grand scheme of the NBA. They have 3 championships, so that's kind of what it takes to be considered a historic franchise in a league where many teams have never won anything. It'd be kind of great to rejuvenate that team, spark up some interest, maybe go for a new Bad Boys era. Detroit usually likes to do something like that. They like to hype up the team. We saw that when Reggie Jackson was first about to go there. He was wearing a Bad Boys hat at the All-Star game on the sideline before he got traded there. All their teams are known for being tough and gritty, and the expectations for him wouldn't be too high if he went there either. He would have some time to learn, rather than there's some other situations on this list where he would be expected to do more right away. So I would say the most interesting scenario here is New Orleans. He would be going to a team that's already built with a lot of talent that many people think are a couple steps away from being a true contender. Like I said, this was made a couple months ago where New Orleans was riding high and everyone was hyping them up, and that just goes to show you how things quickly can change in the NBA. I think fit-wise, he goes perfectly. Valanciunas is a year or so away from being phased out of their plans. So I think having a big man with star potential ready to take his place works really well. On top of that, Zion is a player who works best with players who can space the floor, and Victor would at least provide some of that at an above average level at his position. Not only that, but playing next to Zion, you probably want to have some length protecting the rim too, because Zion has shown that he can't really do that. If, and this is a big if everything went right for New Orleans, this would be one of the most perfect scenarios for the NBA. New Orleans has been one of the worst teams in terms of having a team that the city is behind. Louisiana is more traditionally a football state. So if Victor pans out to be what he is being hyped up to be, we will be looking at a very talented and complete team that can compete year in and year out if they made a couple moves the right way. This could actually propel them into a team that has a strong fan base for years to come if this worked out. I know a lot of people like to talk about how dedicated Warriors fans before they got good, but as someone from Oakland, California, I can tell you that's not really the case. So now that the Warriors have been so historically good, that fan base isn't going away. Even if the Warriors have some down years for a while, that fan base is there and established. So if New Orleans could have some of the same luck, I'm sure the NBA would love that. Plus, that's not even scratching the surface of the hot topic on NBA Twitter around whether the Anthony Davis trade was worth it or not. Obviously, in my opinion, that discussion is nonsense, but NBA Twitter and more accessible basketball media, let's talk about it. And if somehow, some way, the Lakers ended up giving up Victor to the Pelicans, and he was able to live up to the hype, then that conversation will be at an all-time high. Even though I think it's pretty obvious you win a trade if your team wins a championship because of it. Especially when it's debatable if the Pelicans use those assets that they got properly or not. Anyways, I'm getting off track. I think the Pelicans will be a great fit for Victor from all standpoints. All right, San Antonio. San Antonio will probably be the best for Victor as a player. We know how they develop players. I don't know if anybody sees him as a quiet Kawhi type or not, but the quotes I've seen from him show some personality. But maybe San Antonio could zap that out of him and turn him into their next franchise guy for the next decade or so. The dunking comparisons will obviously be in full force. Maybe it wouldn't be best in terms of marketability because we know how the Spurs are, but I think this would be a good place for Victor to come in and establish himself as the #1 guy, something that he might have to work harder for on teams that already have established young talent. San Antonio doesn't have that young, hyper-talented, lotto pick, top 3 prospect, and Victor could be the start of that as they take a few years to build back up to being a good team. He'd also be able to fly under the radar a bit and learn from Pop, who's probably just waiting to be able to coach up that one big prospect and get out of there. Okay, Utah is the first team I'm on the fence about. I know Danny Ainge and company would love to have him, but Utah and then some of their refusal to trade some of the pieces that they had to start fresh was really worrying me earlier in the season. Marketing would be terrible here, obviously. The comparisons would go from Tim Duncan to being compared to Rudy Gobert, which nobody wants, but you know those would be on the way. Utah was kind of reluctant to bottom out and really go for the lottery, and I know some teams see that as something they're against from a pride perspective. They did end up trading for Russell Westbrook and buying him out and whatnot, but I feel like they could have done that when the season started and had better chances at Victor in the first place. Being one of those teams where you're reluctant to go all in and really tank, that can really come around to hurt you. Rebuilds are nice and all and hyped up until it never stops and looks perpetual. You end up always picking 7, 8, 9 for years and years like the Kings or maybe the Magic a few years back when they had Vucevic and Oladipo and O'Quinn and Aaron Gordon and Tobias and Alfred and Nicholson, all those guys that everyone was hyping up saying, oh, the Magic have a great young core. What came of that? Nothing. So if you don't bottom out, you really have to bank on Utah hitting every middle of the pack draft pick because they're not getting any free agents. So it's hard for me to say they would be an ideal team for him if they don't commit to bottoming out. Fun fact is the Wolves pick is going to Utah anyway. So if something happens to the Timberwolves in these last few games, then Utah actually has 2 chances at picking first. Speaking of Orlando, I almost forgot about them as an option. I think they just need talent right now. Getting Paolo is great for them and a good starting point. He kind of reminds me of a Blake Griffin level talent. Clearly an all-star, but we don't know if he's going to be a superstar yet. But Orlando is still young and bad enough to where they can get a high draft pick this year. Victor would fit perfectly with Paolo in my opinion. There's very few teams I think Victor's versatility would not be a good fit for. Obviously why he's so sought after. But if he pans out as a defender because of his length, pause that. Playing with guys like Zion and Paolo, or in a lesser case, even a guy like Julius Randle, would be perfect for him, as those guys are better off protecting on the perimeter than protecting the paint. To be honest, I'm sure drafting a generational big man comes with some baggage for Orlando. Maybe Victor could be the one and things finally develop differently and he doesn't end up going to the Lakers. Charlotte. Okay, Charlotte is one of those situations where obviously they need talent, but it isn't clear what direction they're going in. I know MJ has been trying to sell his majority stake, so we should get some clarity on their direction soon, but it's really tough to decide if this would be a good place for Victor if they don't commit to what they're doing. Victor would be a good pairing with LaMelo and finally get him someone to run with, but I think all these auxiliary pieces they have right now just aren't working. They kind of need a soft rebuild. If they get Victor and keep operating as is, it would be unfortunate to see such a pairing go to waste, but if the team played their cards right, even though they have no history doing so, they could really revitalize a franchise that has never been relevant ever. But once again, hey, maybe MJ selling the team will be good for them and Victor can start a new era. So I had Chicago on my list. It was pretty simple. They were struggling. A lot of people thought they should blow it up. If they blew it up, Victor would be a good starting point. Pretty easy. Historic franchise, big market, 3rd biggest market in the NBA. So it'd be good for Victor if he became a star. I don't think they're going to end up in the lotto anyway, so this is really not worth talking about, but they were on my list because, like I said, I made this a couple months ago. All right, OKC. So OKC has been back and forth in the playoffs, in the play-in picture, out of the play-in picture. It's been an interesting year for them. A lot of people thought going in they were going to be as terrible as they possibly could, but Shea, even though he says it's pronounced Shy, has just been too good this year. He's been insane. He's been going crazy. So it's weird for that reason, and also weird because we haven't seen Chet play. So if Chet worked out, I mean, it'd be good to have both of them. They're both versatile players. They're both big guys, but you don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen where you got guys that have the same skill set and you have to end up choosing which one to keep and you get rid of the other one for pennies on the dollar. I remember when Denver had Nurkic and Jokic and everyone had an opinion on which one they should keep. Obviously, Denver chose the right one, but this was a big topic at the time. I guess in OKC's case, it may not matter as they have so many picks anyway that they could trade up and pick whoever they want. or they could just cash in for whatever star ends up being available, because stars are basically available every offseason because that's how the NBA is now. But we've never really seen a team build this way. This has always been the way that teams build in 2K, and now we have OKC just trying to do it in real life. So we'll see how this goes. Long story short, Victor probably be good here, but I'd rather see him somewhere else. Toronto, I don't think they'll be a factor in the sweepstakes too, but I have them on my list. People thought they should have blew it up this deadline. They love length. Pause again. They're great at building through the draft and capitalizing on trading for the right players at the right time, even if it isn't clear if they will be staying long term. Had they moved on from the guys they had, Victor would have been a great starting point. Their track record speaks for itself. Victor and Scotty would have been a good duo to start with, but maybe this would be a better place for Scoot Henderson. But I'm not even really going to get into it because it's not really worth talking about for Toronto at this point. Okay, Portland. This is where things get interesting. I had Portland listed as a team that was not worth talking about because I didn't foresee them winning the lottery. But I said you never know what could happen. Anything could happen in the NBA. Portland would love to win the lottery. We know that. They have the 5th worst record in the NBA, which is crazy to think how far they've fallen. But I do wonder what would happen if they won the lottery, whether they would keep the pick right now. So if they're committed to Dame, it may be in their best interest to just trade it right now and try and get another star that would fit next to Dame. The problem is I can't think exactly which player that may be, but this is NBA. Stars come available out of nowhere. Funny, I had listed about KD wanting out, but now he's in Phoenix and that isn't really a factor. But I don't know, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, any type of defensive small forward, if they wanted to all of a sudden become available, I'm not sure either of those teams would be extremely interested in the first overall pick. But would that be a good starting point for Portland to pick somebody up? I guess on topic, if they did keep Victor, it'd be a solid place for him. They would for sure get Nurkic out of there if they had Victor. Playing with Dame would be great for him if Dame was still around. If they traded Dame, they could get a haul back and they could start building around Victor, and it would be an even better situation for him. Portland has a solid drafting record, so it'd be okay. Get some picks, build around Victor, have Victor be the number 1, and have assets to help him out when the time is right. Really the only negative in my opinion would be if Portland kind of expected him to be Dame's number 2 right away, and they kept Dame maybe a little too long and they would struggle through it, and we kind of have Portland back in the same situation that they're in now, but who knows. So there have been some rumblings in Atlanta, some Trae Young trade rumblings. I think it's a little too early to begin thinking about that, but if it were to happen, there'd be another good team Victor could go to, have a lot of picks, he'd be the main guy, extra assets, help him win when the time comes. Honestly, even if Trae was to stay there and Atlanta got him, which I don't think is going to happen at this point, I think that'd be one of the more perfect pairings on a basketball court. Victor running pick and rolls with Trae and providing an inside presence that they've needed this year. They've struggled with Capella out of the lineup, and there were many guys that always thought Onyeka Okongwu was always the answer, but it's looked like that's not the case from what we've seen this year. Victor could basically slide into Clint's role seamlessly and learn pretty quickly. Then you could look to Trey Capella, maybe get something for him. Probably not too much, but something to help out and keep building. I don't think it's the perfect situation for him, but I don't think it's that bad either. Maybe not from like a culture, locker room perspective, but from a basketball standpoint, I really like that. Okay, Washington. Washington is a team that we all know has been prolonging a rebuild for as long as they can. Their basketball product is kind of starting to tank for them. The team is not good, inconsistent, injured, all the things that make a bad basketball team. So I wrote a couple months ago that the team clearly doesn't want the bigs that they have to stay there long term, but they're trying to offer an extension to Porzingis when they can. So I don't really understand what they're trying to do. I think this would be terrible for Victor. Washington has shown they don't really know how to build a team. Him having to go be with Beal, who has had some issues sharing the spotlight with a co-star in the past, with one of the most bloated contracts in the league, I don't really think this would be good for him. I think he would go there, they continue to be bad and irrelevant, and they would top out as play-in team or low-seeded team every year. Plus, the marketing factor just is not there. I think it's always going to be an uphill battle for Washington to build a contender. But if they don't restart and build around whatever talented prospect they can get, I don't know what they plan on doing. From my overview, probably left out a couple teams now that probably Indiana and Dallas are in the mix for him, which is crazy to think about. But honestly, I feel like it's not even worth going into too much. Obviously, most teams will love to have him. Obviously, most teams will love to have him as an asset just to trade to somebody. So we'll see what ends up happening to him. I stand by that my favorite spot for him is Houston. I think it'll really round out their team, though obviously they have some concerns in terms of culture and getting their locker room together. But really overall, I think if he goes to Houston, San Antonio, or Orlando, I think he'll end up being in a situation that's actually really good for him. But it's going to be up to him to live up to the hype, so we'll see. Remember, if I end up getting a lot of subscribers, which probably will not happen, I will give away a jersey, 500, 1,000, I don't know, I haven't even decided. I will do a jersey giveaway, and it won't be a cheap fake one, it'll be a pretty nice one, so we'll see. Subscribe if you want one.